We begin today at the Gemara at the bottom of Daf Samachom mit Beis, the last line. Mitzudis Chaya Oifis. It said in the Mishnah that when you have traps for whether Chaya, Oifis, and Dogim, so even though the person that trapped the animal or a bird or a fish did not acquire them properly, al pitaira, but nevertheless, Mipnei Darkei Sholem, Chachamim instituted that you shouldn't take it from him. And in that, Rabbi Yossi said that it's Gezel Gomer. So the Gemara explains what kind of traps are we talking about here. So again, it said in the Mishnah, Mitzudis Chayis V'Oivis V'Dogim Yeshben V'Chulu. V'Ozli V'Ohari, if these are traps that are made from nets, like for example, when you come to capture or to catch fish, so you're using these nets that are made either from uzli, which Rashi says is made from ropes, or uari, also nets that are made from reeds. So over here, in such a case, nobody would argue that it actually is gezel gomer min atayre if you take this away from this person. And the reason is because these traps are made with a receptacle. It's a keli, and the person is kainit completely. It's like his chotzer in a place which is hefker, and he makes this keli of a net. It becomes his 100%. Kipligi, when is their argument here in the Mishnah? Because it's not min atayre, there's no gzeile here. Belechi v'kokri. If he's catching a fish and he's using a fish hook to catch, so that it's not in a chotzer, in a keli where you're kainit, it's just hooked. Or kukri is also a certain kind of a hook. Rashi says it's like you spread out in a pond a big rope which has hooks on all of its sides, or nails on all of its sides, and the fish get caught onto it. So in such a case, minatayri you're not kainit, but midrabanan, Mipnei Darkei Sholem, they said that you shouldn't take it from this person, and on that Rabbi Yossi said that it's Gezel Gomer. The next case in the Mishnah it said, Mitzias Cheres Shoyte V'Chulu, an item that a Cheres Shoyte or cotton found, Minatayra they're not kainit, but Mipnei Darkei Sholem you're not allowed to take it from them. And Rabbi Yossi argues and said on that, Rabbi Yossi Oime Gezel Gomer, that it's 100% Gezel if you take it from the Cheres Shoyte of the cotton. Rav Chisda explains what Rabbi Yossi is saying, that Gezel Gomer midivreim. The Gezel Gomer that Rav Yossi says is only midrabana, not minatayra. Because since over here we're talking about a cheres shoyte v'katan, even Rav Yossi agrees that there's no actual Gezel here. What Rav Yossi is saying is, because of the takana midrabanon, it'll be a full Gezel. It's Chachama or Masaka that it's 100% his and it's a real Gzela. So the Gemara explains, Lamai nafkimina, what is the difference between the Tanakama and Rav Yossi? So the answer is loitziyeh b'dayonim. Whether if a person did take it away from a cheres shoyte v'katan, could you take him to a bezdin to take it back from him in a bezdin? So the Tanakama holds you're not allowed to take it away, but if you did, you can't go to a bezdin to take it away from him. But Rabbi Yossi says no, it's gezel gomer, and you go to a bezdin and bezdin will take it away from you. But Rashi adds, even Rabbi Yossi will agree that it's not a real gzela to become pasal eidus and to be over on the lav of lisigzal. The next and the last case that the Mishnah spoke about over here regarding this Darkei Sholem that Rabbi Yossi argued on was Oni hamenakif beroish hazayis mashatachta v'chulu. An Oni that was picking olives from an olive tree, and the olives that fall to the ground, so you're not allowed to take it. Mipnei Darkei Sholem, it belongs to this Oni. So Tane, in a Braisa we learned about this, im likid v'nosam biyad, if this poor person collected these olives and he placed it into his hands, and then it fell down to the ground, then it is a gezel gomer. If you take that, so then it's gzeila min atayre, because he was already kainit. He placed it into his hands and he was fully kainit. This Gemara here brings an incident that happened. Rav Kahane have a ka'azel lohutzel. Rav Kahane went to the city of Hutzel. Chazye la'ahu gavre. So he saw this individual. The havishadi ufye v'konatren tamri. He threw a stick to a palm tree, and the dates were falling down. So that's how he was collecting the dates for himself. Ozal kamanket v'achel. So Rav Kahana went and took from these dates that fell to the ground, and it was eating it for himself. So basically, even though over here this seems to be the case that the Mishnah is speaking about, that when a person is picking these dates this way, Mipnei Darkei Sholem, you shouldn't take it, even though he wasn't properly kainit, but Rav Kahana went and ate it. So Amalei, this individual tells Rav Kahana, Chazima, the master should see, the biyudoi shedisinu, that these dates, I threw them into my hand, and then later it fell to the ground, but I first put it into my hand, so I was properly kainit, and therefore there's a gezel gomer min atayre here. So how could you go and eat it from me? Now, Tosfos and all the Rishonim discussed the question. So even if Rav Kahana didn't realize that he placed it into his hands, but what's with what it said in the Mishnah that there's a problem of Mipnei Darki Shalom, that you still shouldn't take it, even if it just fell to the ground? So there's many answers to this. The answer that Tosfos gives is that we're talking over here about a person that was throwing at this palm tree, not for the dates. He wasn't trying to get the dates. He was trying to get branches from this palm tree. And the dates fell along with it. And Rav Kahana thought that he's not even interested in these peiros at all. So therefore there's no issue even with Darki Shalom to eat from these dates. That's Tosfos' pshat. Other Rishonim say that over here we're talking about a tree that was from Hefker, not a tree that an oni can take from someone like the halacha by what you can take from a tree, from payah of the tree, but it's talking about a tree that was Hefker, or other Rishonim say he thought he was a guy, so therefore he thought he can take from it. There's many answers to this question. So the Gemara continues and says, after Rav Kahana heard this, so Amalei, he tells this person, Mi asre de Rav Yeshiata. You hear from this place Hutzel, the place where Rav Yeshia lives. And Rav Yeshia taught you this halacha that you should understand the difference if you took it into your hands and you properly kain it, or you're not properly kain it. So Kari Alei, Rav Kahana said about Rav Yeshia that taught his people so well, the tzaddik Yisaid Eilam, that he's a tzaddik, the foundation of the world. He teaches his people Torah. Then the last case in the Mishnah was that you don't protest against the paupers of Goyim that come along with Yidden to collect the leket shikha and peya in the field because of Darki Shalom. Ton Rabbana on a similar halacha we learned in Abraisa, mefarnesin aniye nochrim imani Yisrael. We feed Goyim, the paupers of Goyim, along with the aniye Yisrael. And also, you go to visit the sick amongst Goyim, together with the ones that are sick amongst Yidden. And you bury also from Goyim together with the Yidden. And Rashi here clarifies, it doesn't mean that they're buried in the same cemetery or in the same place, but it just means that both are buried. And here, from Rashi, it's actually mashma, that all of these cases here, it says, it's only if you're being mefarnes a yid, so then you also mefarnes a guy that's there with him. And if you're visiting the sick by a yid, so you visit a guy. And the same with the kvura, only if it's along with a yid. But stam to go and be mefarnes a guy, there's no takana of Darki Shalom for this. But there are other Rishonim that say that even if it's just separate to be mefarnes a guy and so on, it's also mepnei Darki Shalom that you do this for a guy as well. Okay, the Mishnah continues with a few things that Chachamim were mesakin, all for Darki Shalom. A woman could lend to her friend, which is suspected of using and eating from the fruits of Shemitah. Now Rashi explains what we're talking about is, in the year of Shemitah, after a certain point, you're not allowed to keep from the fruits of Shemitah in your house. You have to put them out into the field to be hefker. This is what's called the time of beer. After it's not available anymore for the animals outside in the field, you have to put it out. So here, this woman has a friend that is suspected of keeping the fruits of Shemitah for herself and eating them. So nevertheless, you could lend to this friend, a nafa, a kibra, a sieve or a sifter, v'rachayim, a mill, a tanner, an oven, to cook and prepare and bake with her food, even though you know that she's using food from Shemitah. And so even though you're sort of causing her to be over an isser, but you're not directly assisting her in this isser that she's doing, you're just lending her a utensil that she's going to use, so it's allowed. And as the Mishnah here will say soon, the reason it's allowed is because of Darki Shalom. But you should not select or grind together with her, to do the actual work together with her in the produce that she's keeping from Shemitah. So your mamish assisting her in using produce from Shemitah, that's not allowed. Similar halacha, Eishes Chaver, the wife of a Chaver. Now a Chaver is a person that is careful with separating the Trumas and Maises properly, and also a person that is careful with eating everything betara, not to make things tamei. So the wife of a Chaver, Mash'eles le'eshes ha'ma'aretz, she could lend to the wife of an ha'ma'aretz, that again is simply someone that's not careful with Trumas and Maises properly, and is also not careful with making things tamei. So she could lend her a nafa, a kivra, a sieve, or a sifter. Ubeireres, and here the Mishnah actually says, Ubeireres v'techenes umerakedes ima. You could sort or grind or sift together with her. You can do the work mamish together with her, even though the chayre you're mamish helping her out in what she's doing, which is she should be making something tamei, she's preparing food to eat, even though there's no meister taken. But here you could do it with her. And the Gemara will ask why this is different than the previous case. Avol, says the Mishnah, mishetata lesamayim, but when she now takes a flour and she pours the water into this flour, so what happens when she pours the water into the flour? So now you're forming a dough. So the moment you form a dough, now there's a mitzvah of separating the challah. Now when you have challah, so it's aser min atayra to be metame challah. Just like you're not allowed to be metame truma min atayra. Rashi later here brings the pasuk mishmeres trumaisai. You're not allowed to be metame truma. You're not allowed to be metame challah. Not only are you not allowed to be metame challah, even this dough that the challah was not yet separated from it, but because it has challah in it that wasn't yet separated, you're not allowed to be metame it. So therefore, once she pours the water and now it becomes a dough, loy tiga ima, you should not touch it. You should not help her out together with her making this dough. You're not allowed to assist someone that's doing an aveda. This Eishes HaMa'aretz is tamei, and she's making here this dough tamei, which has challah in it. Says the Mishnah, so for Kulon, all of this that we said here, that you could lend her and you could sort of indirectly assist her when she's going to end up using your utensil for an aveda. This was only for the purpose of Darkei Shalom. But again, as Rashi says here, the Darkei Shalom is only to lend her, but not to actually assist her within an aveda itself. You could also assist a guy that's working in a field in Shemitah. And Rashi says, it sounds like the Mishnah is saying that you can mamish help them in their work in the field. The Gemara will discuss this. You can't assist the Yid in the year of Shemitah. And then Bechlal, you can always greet a guy. And when it talks about greeting a guy, it specifically means you greet him with the word Shalom. As Rashi here says, Shalom is the name of the Eibishter. So even though it's the name of the Eibishter, but nevertheless, you can still greet a guy with the name of the Eibishter. And that is the reason is Mipnei Darkei Shalom. 4 ways of peace. It should be peaceful. So the Gemara asks a question here in the first 2 cases of the Mishnah: Ma'ishna Reisha or Ma'ishna Seifa? What's the difference in the Reisha? It says you could lend her a utensil that she'll then use herself for something which is aser, for the produce of Shemitah. In the next case, by the Eishes HaMa'aretz, it says not only could you lend her a utensil, but you could actually do the work together with her, even though it seems like you're mamish directly assisting her with something which is aser. So what's the difference? Amar Abaye, so Abaye answers, no. In the second case, by the wife of the Amaretz, Roiv Amaretz Meisrenheim. Most Amaratzim actually do give Meiser. It's only a chumre, a chashash midrabana that there are some that don't, that therefore, from the produce of Amaretz, you have to give Meisers again. But really, most give. So therefore, they were makel and they allowed you to do the work together with her in their produce because we're not cheshish so far. Rava has a different answer. Now Rava actually argues on this point that Abaye says that Roiv Amaratzim give Meiser. Rava holds if it's an Amaretz that we are concerned that he doesn't give Meiser, so then it's a 50-50. Some give and some don't. So really, you would not be allowed to assist this wife of this Amaretz with this produce that it's a real suffix if the Meiser was taken. But what is this Mishnah talking about? Ba'amaretz de Rab Meir. We're talking over here specifically about this Amaretz, which the Gemara will now bring soon from Rab Meir, and he's talking about an Amaretz where the only concern about this Amaretz is that they're not careful not to be metame their produce. And the Tome Vitare de Rabbanan. And over here, since we're dealing with Chulin, regarding Chulin, Menatayre, there's no issue of being metame Chulin. With the Rabbanan, in Eretz Yisrael, you're not supposed to be metame Chulin. So therefore, since it's only Exedim with the Rabbanan, so therefore they allow the Eishes Chaver to do the work together with the Eishes Amaretz, even though she might be metame this Chulin here. So what is this Amaretz that Rab Meir spoke about? The Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, Ezeu Amaretz. Who is the Amaretz that Chazal usually speak about? So Kol she'eino eichel chulav b'tara. That's a person that doesn't eat his chulin with being pure tara. Divrei Rab Meir, that's Rab Meir's opinion. So that's the Amaretz that our Mishnah was speaking about. Chachamim say, no, the Amaretz Chachamim usually spoke about is Kol she'eino ma'aser pereisa. He doesn't give ma'aser of his peres. Okay, so now the Gemara will ask a question here in the Pshat of the Mishnah according to Rava. Frag the Gemara, v'ho mediktani seife. What does it say right after this in the Mishnah? That mishetatel esamayim, that when she takes now flour and she pours water into the flour and she's making a dough, so then loitiga imo. You shouldn't, the wife of the chaver should not assist her and help her out and touch with her together. Why not? Because over here, once she's making a dough, so you're going to be metame the challah here. So Rashi explains, the Gemara understands at this point that the issue of being metame is only when you pour water. And the reason is because the halacha, by being metame, any food does not become tame unless it becomes mukhshel lekabel tumah, and that is if it becomes moist, it touches something which is wet, water or any of the mash can go on it. So over here, the Gemara understands right now that only when you pour water on the flour and then it becomes kosher, mukhshel lekabel tumah, so now you shouldn't help her out of here, she could be metame the challah. Okay, so what do we understand from this? Miklal, so shouldn't we understand from this, the Reisha, that before the water is poured there, and the Reisha, when it just talks about grinding the flour or something else, so then la v'tumah v'tara askina. The issue over here of helping the Amoritz is not any issue of tumah v'tara. So according to Rav's Pshat, there's no issue of tumah v'tara. And there's also no issue of the maisris, because Rav says we're talking about Amoritz that actually gives maisris. The only issue could be is with the tumah and tara. So then if so, what is the issue in the Reisha? Why shouldn't you be able to help this woman with her things? What's the chiddush? The Mishnah says, Mipnei darkei shalom. So the Gemara answers that no. Reisha, v'seifa, b'tumah, v'tara. The truth is, both in the Reisha and the Seifa, the issue with this Amoritz is that she's being metama this produce. And Rashi explains that the truth is, even in the Reisha, we must be talking about produce that already came in contact with water or one of the mashkin, it's already mukhshel lekabel tumah. So now, what's the difference between the beginning and then the Seifa where water was poured? In the beginning, we're talking about the grain and the grinding of it or baking of it, whatever it is. So over there, we're talking about just being metame chulin. So being metame chulin is just midrabanan, as the Gemara pointed out before. So for that, we say that Rab Chacham were machmer, not a sister mipnei darkei shalom. But v'seife b'tumas challah, once you pour the water and you have a dough, with the dough there's a chiyuv of challah, not to be metame challah is the ism and atayra. As again, as Rashi here brings the pasuk mishmeres trumaisa, you're not allowed to be metame truma or challah. So therefore over there it says you're not allowed a sister for this because it's a ism and atayra. So the Gemara asks on this, there's a contradiction on this from what it says in the Braise. Toichanin, the Braise says toichanin umafkidin eitzel oichle shvius ve'etzel oichle periseim betumah. You could grind, or you could give as a pekadon, as a deposit, to somebody that you suspect him that he eats produce from Shemitah, or to somebody that you know that he eats his peiros betumah, his produce with tumah, and you can give it to them. And Rashi says what this Braise is saying is you don't have to be concerned that they're going to switch from their own that they were metame or from their own which is Shemitah with what you gave them. You don't have to suspect them. They're going to do it properly and they're going to give it back to you. You, however, cannot assist somebody that you know is suspected for not keeping Shemitah, or someone that doesn't give maisris properly, or again, someone that eats his peiros with tumah, that is, you cannot go and assist them with their produce, with the work that they're doing with their produce. So what do we see over here? It clearly says that someone that's eating their peiros betumah, you cannot go and assist them with this. So now Rabbi's pshat in our Mishnah was that someone that is doing is someone that's Amoritz, that's not careful with the peiros and they eat it betumah, you could assist them. And the reason is because it's chulin. And for chulin, there's only ism d'Rabbanan not to be metamed. So they weren't geyser not to assist them with this. But here it says, oichle periseim betumah, only ism d'Rabbanan. You should not assist them. You should not do the work together with them. Amar Abaye, so Abaye answered for this, and now this is Abaye answering for Rava. Abaye had a different pshat in the Mishnah before, and according to Abaye, there's no question here, but according to Rava's pshat, the Gemara is asking here. So Abaye answered, Hasam b'koyin hachashad lechel truma b'tumah askina. There, it's not talking about chulin. It's talking about truma. And it's talking about a koyin that we suspect of eating his truma with tumah. Now that's the issa, the havele tumah da'iraisa. So this is a issa of being metame truma min atayra. Therefore, this Braise is saying you shouldn't assist them in doing this issa min atayra. But our Mishnah was talking about the chulin, which is only issa min rabbanan. So the Gemara asks on this, wait a minute, if this Braise here is talking about a koyin that is suspected of being metame the truma min atayre, which is also min atayre. So if so, mafkidin, in the beginning of the brayse it says that for such a person you can give him a deposit truma, you can allow him to have truma. You're not concerned about this. But v'raminu, I'll ask you from what it says in another brayse, mafkidin truma eitzil yisrael amaretz. If you have truma, you can give it to a Yisrael that's an Amaretz, and there's no concern that he's going to be metame this truma. But but you can't give truma to a kain that's an Amaretz mipnei shaliba gaspa, because he's very used to handling truma, and we're concerned that because we know he's not careful while he's tameh to touch the truma, he might be metamed. A Yisrael, he knows truma is different. We're not concerned that he's going to touch it. But by a kain Amaretz, we are. So how can we say here that the previous brayse is talking about that a kohen that is handling truma and we're suspecting that he's going to do it betumah, and still you can give him truma when this brayse clearly says you can't? So when Rabbi Loi answers, we're going to have to say that on the previous brayse when it says you can give the kohen truma even though he handles things with tumah, b'klicheres hamukev tzamid pasel. This is talking about that you give it to him in an earthenware keli which is completely sealed, and he can't come to touch it, so we're not concerned that he's going to touch it. Fragt the Gemara, that's not enough of an answer. But v'leichish shema tisitanu ishtei nida. There's still a concern that maybe his wife, which is tamei, so she, even without touching it, just by lifting this up or moving it, she could also make it tamei. So why are you allowed to give it to this kayin, this truma, if we know that he's not careful with the tumah here? So the Gemara gives a different answer. So Elam Rabbi Yirmiyah, so Rabbi Yirmiyah says, like kasha. It's not a contradiction here. We'll have to say as follows. Kan bepeiris shehochsheru. In the second brayse that it says you can't give the kayin tumah if you know he's an amaretz. That's because the produce you're giving him became wet and it's already susceptible to tumah. And kan in the previous brayse it's bepeiris sheloyochsheru. It's talking about you giving the kayin produce of truma that was not yet mukhshar to be makabel tumah, and we're not concerned even if the kain touches it, it's not going to become tumah. So therefore you can give it to him. But Rashi clarifies, nevertheless, in that brayse it says when the kain himself is doing the work with his own produce, you're not allowed to assist him, even though we just said we're talking about produce that's not mukhshar, but you don't know that for sure. By your own produce that you're giving the kain, you know that it's not yet mukhshar. It didn't become wet yet. But the kain's own produce that he's working with, you're not allowed to assist him because you don't know. Maybe it became wet already. Maybe it's mukhshar, l'kabel tumah. Okay, so the Gemara now asks on this, stated from another brayse, V'raminu, I'll ask you a question. The brayse says as follows. Or this is actually a Mishnah in Demai. Hamayelech chitin l'toichen kuti or l'toichen amaretz. A person that brings his wheat to grind by a kuti or by another grinder, which is an amaretz. So you have to be concerned about what this person is doing for you. So the brayse says, you could rely on them that if it's a person, if there's a suspicion there about maisris or about shmita, so for that you don't have to be concerned about. And meaning you don't have to be concerned that they're taking your produce and they're switching it with their own and they're giving you back from their own, which the maisris wasn't taken, or which is produce from shmita. That you don't have to be concerned about. They're not going to switch it. But for tumah, we are concerned about this. If there's a concern here about tumah, so then there is a concern about this. So the question is, before we said that there's no concern about tumah, and here it says there is a concern. So the Gemara says, Hi, my rumya. What kind of a question is this? Didn't we already explain before that the previous brayse that it says that there's no concern about giving to an amaret something which is tameh, it's only because it's produce that it's not yet susceptible for any tumah. Over here it's talking about produce which is susceptible for tumah. We gave that answer already. So the Gemara says, so the Kari law, my Kari law. So the one that asked this question, why did he even ask this question? The answer is so obvious. So says the Gemara, you're right, that wasn't his main question. He brought up this brayse because he wanted to ask a different contradiction here. Here there's another contradiction that the Gemara will now ask from another brayse. And the question really is on the other point that it says there in that brayse. What does it say there? That harei elu b'cheskasan l'maiser or l'shvius, that if you give someone produce and he's an amaretz and he doesn't separate maisres, you don't know if he does, or they use shmita, so you're not concerned, you're not concerned that maybe they took yours and they switched it with their own and they're giving you back what's not good. And we saw the same thing also in the brayse in the beginning of the Yama, that we're not concerned about this. So on this, he brought this brayse here because on this he wanted to ask a contradiction from the following Mishnah here. So I'll ask you a question from what it says in the Mishnah. Again, sorry. A person that gives to his mother-in-law a flour and whatever is needed to make a dough. So ma'aser, again, or he gave her a dough to prepare it, to bake it. Ma'aser eshu naisin. Take off the maisris before you give it to her, because we're talking over here about a mother-in-law that is a wife of an Amma Oretz, so you can't rely on her taking the maisris. And also, and then when you get this dough, this baked bread back from your mother-in-law, you have to take maisris again. And why? Because she should be suspected of switching this dough that you gave her. If she baked it and it didn't come out good, what is she going to do? She's going to take from her own dough and she's going to bake it and give you from her own. So over here we see that we are suspecting a wife of an Amaretz, in this case a mother-in-law, to switch with her own dough with yours. And before we said that we're not concerned about such a thing. And says the Gemara there, it's talking specifically about a mother-in-law. Why? Hasam kediktani taime. There, the reason is, you see here what it says in the Braisa, and it's indicated in the Mishnah as well. Omer Rabbi Yehuda roitzi b'takonas bito. The only reason we're concerned over here that the mother-in-law will switch this is because we know that the mother-in-law is concerned about the welfare of her daughter, that she should have a good bread, good challah to eat. So if it didn't come out good, she might switch it. Or a baisha mechasana, or maybe she's embarrassed over her son-in-law. So that's why we're afraid she's going to switch it. But stam, regarding any other person, that this Amma Oretz will bedafke switch it for stamazoi, for that we're not concerned about. So the Gemara asks in that, but anyone else besides a mother-in-law, if it's a wife of an Amma Oretz or an Amma Oretz, are we not concerned if you give them produce that they may switch it from with their own, which is not good? But Vatana, we learned in the Mishnah, Hanaisin lepundikis, if a person is giving to an innkeeper or to the balabasta of the home. Rashi says we're talking about a yeshiva student that learns by his teacher, but he stays by this woman and he eats from her. So he can give from his dough to the mother of the home. And ma'aser eshu naisin lo, but you're going to have to take off the maiseris before you give it to her, because you can't rely on her. She's the wife of an Amma Oretz. You can't rely on her taking maiseris. And also, and after she gives it back to you, you have to give maiseris again. Again, the same reason, because we're concerned that she may have switched it out with her own. And this is not a mother-in-law, so we see that we're concerned about this. And says the Gemara there as well, Hasam Moiriya v'Amra, this woman says to herself a certain heter, and she says, look, Bar Beirav lechel chamime. Let this yeshiva student, he deserves to eat a fresh hot bread. And I'll eat the cold bread. So if she baked for this yeshiva student already a few days ago, and now it's cold, she may want to serve him fresh bread, so she may switch it. So again, she's not doing it with a malicious intent. She's doing it for a good reason. So in such a case, we could be concerned that this would happen. But stam, in another case, for a malicious intent, we're not concerned that a person would switch, even by an Amma Oretz. Further, the Gemara asks one more question on this. Vakati la'alme leichashinan. Still, is it true that otherwise we're not concerned that the Amma Oretz will switch what you give him? But vatanya, we learned in the Braisa, Eishes chaver techenes im eishes Amma Oretz. The wife of a chaver can go and assist and grind together with the wife of an Amma Oretz. Now, the concern over here could be, and we're going to learn Rashi's pshat in this Gemara. The concern over here could be that the wife of an Amma Oretz is grinding from her grain, and she doesn't take the maestros weren't taken properly, right? So if the wife of the chaver is doing the work together with the wife of the Amma Oretz, the wife of the chaver may end up taking and eating from this produce from the Amma Oretz, and the maestros weren't taken properly. So nevertheless, we're not concerned about this. You're allowed bizman sheitmeya. And that's only if this wife of the chaver is tummy now. Because in the time when she's tummy, she's not going to touch the food and take it into her mouth. Because she doesn't want to make the food tummy. She's careful not to make even chulim tummy. So we're not concerned that she may end up eating from something which the maises were not taking from it. But in a time where the wife of the amare, of the chaver that is tahir, so now she may end up taking something and eating for herself, and she's eating from the produce of this Amma Oretz, which the maises weren't taking from. Now Rav Shimon ben Elazar says, Af bizman sheitmei lo titchaim. Even in a time when the wife of the chaver is tamei, still she shouldn't grind, she shouldn't do work together with this wife of the Amma Oretz, with the produce of the Amma Oretz. Why? Because her friend, the Eishes Amma Oretz, may give her from this food there, and that she should eat. She'll offer and give her food to eat. Now, what are we talking about over here? This is a wife of Am Haaretz, and who does the produce and the challah or whatever she's preparing belong to? It belongs to her husband. And she's doing the work together with her friend, and she might, the Brais here says that she might take from this food and share with her friend. So says the Gemara, Nahashte Mignev Ganve. So we see here, according to Rav Shimon ben Elazar, we're concerned that this wife of the Am Haaretz may steal. She's basically stealing from her husband, taking from this produce and giving it to eat to her friend that's helping her. So Chalufil Mechlefe. If we're concerned about her stealing, should we not be concerned that the wife of Am Haaretz, if you give her something to prepare for you, that she may switch it out with her own and give you something which is the mices weren't taken, or maybe it's the shmita food. So why are we concerned about this? Rav Yosef answers, Hasam Nami, there as well, she's not doing this with malicious intent, but Maria v'Amra, she tells herself that this is allowed. And why should she think it's allowed? Because Tura midishe ka'achal, just like the halacha is that an ox that's threshing and doing work, while he's doing the work, there's a lav. You're not allowed to muzzle him, you have to let him eat while he's doing the work. So she thinks, I'm also allowed to give to my friend that's helping me to eat, even though it belongs to my husband, because it's during the work, and this is allowed. So therefore, in such a case, she's made a heter, and therefore we're concerned. But in a regular case, we're not concerned that our Am Haaretz will switch out what you gave him for something else. Just to finish off, there's actually a discussion here in the Marsha and other Achrayim that the truth is that this Meira heter, the Gemara says that this wife will think that this is allowed. It actually is allowed. The halach is just like a shirt. You're not allowed a Muslim during the work and he can eat from his work. And by a man, a worker as well, during his work, he's allowed to eat. So it's not only a Meira heter, it's allowed. So as a discussion of this in Mefarshim, you're going to have to say that over here, we're saying the Meira heter is after the work is done. But I'm not exactly sure that fits into the Pshat of the Gemara here, because we're talking about Nisenes Lavaycheles, that she may come to eat from something which the mices weren't taken even during the work. Akopanim, it's a discussion here in the Mefarshim that this seems to be something which is actually mutter.